All right, we're live again. It's Wednesday, it's April. I'm back with the positive effect. Every week I come live to have a conversation with a retail leader that's had a positive effect on the business that they ran and the people that they worked with, because the positive effect of leadership cannot be underestimated. And this week, I am really excited to bring Brett Halliday on to the Positive Effect Live to share his story with our audience. So, Brett, welcome to the Positive Effect.
Hi, April. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm so excited. I'm really so interested in your story because you were, you know, at one retailer for such a long time, and I find that so challenging because you've got to keep reinventing and building and reinventing, and I think that's one of the hardest things for leaders to do, instead of just going and fixing. So can't wait to hear all about what you achieved and how you did that. So we're going to jump right into it. We've got about 30 minutes to chat with you today. And so if you want to start off, tell us a bit about your story before retail, how you got into retail, because we always find it really fascinating and interesting how we all end up in retail. Some of us thought of it as a real career. Some of us just fell into it. But yeah, we'd love to hear your story.
Yeah. Well, I think, like most people, it was probably accidental, really. I think most people accidentally fall into retail. Nobody grows up, and I suppose if you think back to when we were 4 and 5 and 6 years old and everyone goes, what do you want to do? We all dressed up as firemen or policemen or nurses or doctors. I mean, there was always the stereotypical idea of this is what I'm going to do when we're children. And no one ever, very rarely, I would imagine, dressed up as a shopkeeper or a retailer and said, I'm going to go and sell jewelry for a living, because that didn't even cross my mind. So yeah, it was accidental. I left school, and I suppose not many people would know, but I left school and went into the workforce in an industrial town in Sydney in Australia. At 15, I finished grade 10, and off to the steelworks I went, like my dad and his father before him, and a very big coal mining town. So most of the boys in the town entered the steel or the industrial workforce at a very young age.
Wow.
I then navigated and changed careers, and I joined the Royal Australian Navy at 18, and spent the next 6 years, or most of the good parts of 6 years, at sea, traveling the world. And that's really where I grew up. I learnt disciplines. I was trained to be a aircraft controller, radar plotter, which was a little bit different. So I spent a lot of years traveling the world, and really understanding and learning just all about people management. Living on a ship with 300 other people, you've got to get along, right? Or there's lots of fights or arguments. And so living in close quarters with a diverse range of people, working hard, working 24/7, there's no breaks. You really have to start to learn to get along with people and understanding personalities and behaviors. And that was really, I suppose, really, when I look back at it, a great learning experience for a life in retail. And then when I got out of the Navy, I thought, okay, what do I do now? And I stumbled across and was fortunate enough to be recruited by Micheal Hill. And Micheal Hill Jeweller had only recently entered Australia. This is back in 1993. And they just entered, and a guy rang me and said, hey, this would be really cool. And I thought, I've never worked in retail, let alone jewelry, didn't know anything about it, or never worked in retail in my life. But it was on the basis that they were expanding. There was lots of growth. They had a great business model, and I could actually learn about business, learn selling and managing people, working in a team, learning a business model to ultimately one day maybe be a businessman. And then who knows, 27 years later, I'm sitting in Canada with a 86 store chain under my belt, and so many great stories, and an amazing career to be very thankful for. And it was very special. So it was an amazing journey.
Yeah. So when you started off at Micheal Hill, did you ever think that you would be president of the chain in Canada?
No. Who would have thought? We had, I think, at that stage about 12 stores in Australia, and I was a trainee manager in a store in Canberra, and I thought, yeah, this will be cool. And actually, the manager that I'm still friends with today that recruited me, he said, look, I'm going to do this for a couple of years. I'm going to learn how to read a P&L and run a business, and then I'm going to open my own businesses. And he did. He left a couple of years later. He went and opened his own little news agencies. And so then I got the keys one day. He said, I'm leaving. Here's the keys, and you're now the manager. And that was it. Like, and away I went. And so I think how it progressed was I just took every opportunity. You know, there was a new store opening, so I took that, and then I moved to Queensland for a new opportunity. And I was in close contact with Micheal, and he had his vision and goal to have stores everywhere globally, and so I just took on opportunities, and I was fortunate enough to go to new areas and learnt by trial and error. And then when the opportunity to come to Canada, we jumped at it as a family, and we moved here in 2007 and then opened 86 stores across Canada, and what a blast that was.
I'm sure.
Amazing.
If you're jumped, I'm just seeing people jump on the chat. Hey Dean, hey to a few of you that always are regulars showing up. Just put in the chat where you're coming from, because we love to know where everybody's coming from across the globe. LinkedIn's like an international retail community, which is awesome. So I mean, what I'm hearing from you is and I'm saying this because our audience is like retail managers, leaders, directors, people that want to grow in their career. And you have this story all the way from sales floor, shop manager, training manager, all the way up to a president of a chain. I mean, that's pretty impressive. A lot of people, when I worked in the stores, were like, how do I get your job? And it's inspiring for people to hear people like yourself talk about your career, because it is possible. It is, you are able to have an amazing career in retail. Like you said, we didn't think about that when we were younger, playing, but it totally is. So what inspired you to grow and continue in your retail career, in your leadership role? Because that was obviously a decision you made at some point, right? Like to continue to grow.
Yeah, it was, I suppose, a combination of the biggest thing that was working in retail was the ability to lead teams. I come from a sporting background and grew up, in competitive sports. But leading teams, and retail is a perfect opportunity. As we were growing teams, and the ability to lead teams and to bring people into the business, watch them learn a new skill, develop, and be successful, and obviously then expand. And we were fortunate enough to be expanding, and I suppose I just bought into the growth. It was, we could clearly see, and Micheal was quite visionary. Like, Micheal always shared the dream of, 1,000 stores by 22. We're going to have 1,000 stores. We're going to be global. And we all had that. We were able to see his vision. He could articulate it well. And there was constant growth. So it was really not so much that we needed to be forced to do it, but we wanted to. We wanted to be part of the success. And obviously success breeds success, and as we grew, there's more opportunities. And it was just about growing yourself. We all wanted to get better. Obviously there was a monetary and a financial reward there to it, but that didn't play a part. And for me, I had a young family. It was, what is the next 20 years going to look like? And I suppose because we had a promote from within culture, we had a succession culture, and people were growing and being promoted from within. I could see that I could stay with this organization and have a long career and progress my career. I could learn more, constantly learn, but also provide for and give security to my family, without having to jump from company to company to company, which just suited my style.
Yeah, I know. It's amazing. I'm going to go back. I know I have a list of questions that I give out to people before they jump on here, but sometimes you say somebody says something, and I'm like, oh, I want to ask more questions around that. So this wasn't on the list, but I'm going to ask you anyway, because you touched on internal succession planning from within. Okay. Yep. Now, how do you create that, or give us some practical things of like, you say that, but what does that look like? Because I work for organizations that always went external. And then the last organization I went to, we actually really did succession plan from within. And we really believed in like moving people from stores to DM up. I took a store manager that was her first job in retail. She was a store manager at David's Tea, and she became a district manager. She left to go, no, she went to go and be a DM somewhere else. And then I brought her back as a regional director. Now, within 6 years, she went from a store manager to a regional director, and people were like, you're taking a bit of a risk. And I was like, well, no, I know I have the tools to succession plan, and she's got that natural ability to do it. And now she's still with the company as a regional director. And that's not often that happens, but how do you create that?
Yeah, that's a good question, because, and there'll always be the debate whether, is promotion from within or internal promotion the right thing, and are you missing out on people that are outside the organization and good people? And I think it's a balance of both. In the early days, I think, we were a very fast growth organization. We were rapidly growing, and when I was in Canada, I went through 4 or 5 years of we were opening 14 stores a year. And so, to grow that quickly, and obviously in specialty retail, jewelry is quite special. It's very directly linked to face-to-face selling. I mean, there's lots of skills. There's a lot of knowledge around it, but it was important to have people moving through for our model. So how do you create it? It's getting out to the shop floor and having lots of coffees, So as the president or the leader, even before me in Australia, Micheal and the CEO, we were always in the stores. Like, we lived in the stores, and for the first 5 years in Canada, I didn't have an office. I worked out in my basement. My office was the stores. And so being in the stores on the shop floor, whether you were the manager, the regional manager, the president, or whatever, the HR director, like, we're in the stores. And that's how you build that culture. Everybody's there. No one's above serving a customer. No one's above making a sale. And so building that brand. Then I think, to back it up, and where we made the big change, especially in Canada, we actually we created and built a retail academy, an internal retail academy. And we recognised through RCC, we won the Retail Academy, Retail Council of Canada Award 1 year for our Retail Academy, and that changed things, because we actually had a place internally that we could actually bring our people together and get them together in groups and actually train them. But we also promoted from within. The regional managers come from store managers, and the trainees moved into stores. And I think word spread. Like, from a recruiting point of view, the team of managers that we had in place were all recruited from referrals.
Right.
People wanted to join the organization because word spread that, hey, you can join this business as a trainee manager and then be a regional manager in maybe 5, 6, 8 years time. And so there was, I think it was,
it organically happens.
It
organically happens, right? And that's why I say the positive effect of leadership, it's huge. It goes far beyond the 4 walls of the store, far beyond the company that you work for, because as a leader in retail today, your effect of how you treat people, how you train people, how you promote people, how you encourage people, it's word of mouth, right? People here, I know people always wanted to join my team. Some people would call me and say, if you're looking like I want to join your team, I'm like, well, not now, but maybe in 6 months I have a role. And then I could just call somebody and say, hey, I've got a role right now. Do you want to join? And they'd be like, sign me up, And I think that can't be talked about enough. But I'm going to switch gears and go into another question. Okay. So what did you learn throughout your time as president of Micheal Hill? Like, what's a big lesson? Because I love sharing these with our audience.
Look, the biggest one, and I think this isn't just from Micheal Hill, right? This is, I've learned from a lot of people, but the teams are the heroes. our frontline workers are the heroes. And it's interesting. We developed, and we had an internal employee handbook that people got when they first started. And on the second page, like you open it on the inside of the first page, there was the corporate structure, and it was store staff and CEO at the bottom. We actually flipped it. So people that join the organization as a salesperson and they open their employee handbook, they saw that they were the top of the food chain. Like, the teams are the heroes. Like, I was only as good as my teams, and that's the biggest one. And so it's about, how do you celebrate? How do you celebrate them all the time? How do you serve them better? How do you spend time with them? How do you teach them? How do you develop them? And then how do you give them opportunities to grow, which then creates that culture of people want to stay, they want to grow, they want to develop their skills. And
That's a great.
It's a sense of belonging. It's
Yeah.
like the tribe
effect. I think that's a great just nugget for anybody. If you're at any level, if you're an assistant manager, you're a store manager, a DM, you're a director, you're a VP, president, CEO, whatever role you are, to like walk into your job tomorrow and actually flip it upside down, put your team above you, and actually have this mindset of like, if my team are the people I serve and they're more important than me, what would my behaviors look like today? How would I show up? How would I speak to people? What would I do? Would I be more present? Would I observe more? That kind of stuff, right? We were talking about that a little bit earlier before we got on, just being more present and observing and like really being there to celebrate, because you can't do that if you're not present, if you're not paying attention, if you're not being mindful, if you're not observing what's going on. You can't recognize people. You can't have that culture. It's not possible. Super important. All right, I have another question for you. Sorry, go ahead.
Can I say one more? I had three things wrote down. The other one was to search for and develop your successes. Your whole goal, my whole job as a president was, how do I find and how do I develop my successes? And the greatest thing to me is now leaving Micheal Hill and having my successors that I recruited years ago in that position, and they will be far better than what I ever was. Like, they will do and nothing's more rewarding than watching people develop into a succession plan. And then the other one is to carve out time for thinking. The hardest thing is, we're all so busy, but you have to carve out time for thinking, and it's got to be in there. It's got to be undistracted, and you've got to think about, because as you advance your career, the most important part is to think about the future and what you should be doing, and not being stuck in the weeds.
Oh, that is music to my ears, because in the positive effect, ACT, which is accept, create, teach, create, the second step is about thinking time. It's about envisioning, it's about thinking, because visualization is key, and you can't do that if you're not thinking and you're not spending that time. You need to really put calendar time blocked out for you. Sometimes I see leaders and they're like, oh, I'm so busy. And then it's like, you run your own calendar, right? Like, you can block a time that says thinking in your calendar. And if you're not doing that right now, listen to what Brett's saying, because it's really important. It was something that I did, and I still do. Sometimes I have a hard time as an entrepreneur, not going to lie, but it's one of those things that it's one of those behaviors that you have to kind of adopt. That's why we have a meditation wellness course in Retail U, because it's like 10 minutes to get you to kind of still your mind so that you can open it up to new processes and thinking, because you only know what you know, and inspiration pops in when you've opened your mind up and emptied it of the everyday to-dos, right?
I was talking to someone about this a couple of weeks ago, and I was saying, it's interesting when you block out that time and you turn your phone off, you turn your emails off, and you block out the time and you go and spend it. When you come back, there's no phone calls, there's no emails. So it's interesting, because we're not as important as we think we are, right? So when you have time, and because it allows your team to actually do the work for you, and allows them to grow and them to actually to step up, and it's so important.
So I've got a few more questions. I'm looking at time. We're doing good. what did you do to develop the necessary skills to lead? I was talking to a group of Ryerson students last week, and the topic was how to develop your leadership skills in the job that you currently have, if you don't have a leadership job. Because I know in retail back in the day, it was like you do the job and then you get the job. And me, I was like you, I signed up for everything. I'm like, put me on the pilot, put me on this, put me on that. I'll move to that store. I'll go fix this. And those experiences grew me because I was part of groups of people and having to challenge my own skills and then reading books or whatever. But they asked me last week, like they were asking me questions like, do you have to be a leader? Like all these questions. And I was like, oh, these are golden. But, we all grow in different ways. So what did you do to develop the skills necessary to lead? Or do you think that you were just naturally the leader that you are today?
Oh no. Look, there's no natural to it, and look, I think we are who we are. I mean, that's who we are. We all have our own style, and we'll attract different team members. But I took on every opportunity, like I said. If there was, go and visit this store, or go and help these people out, or do that. But it was also about learning. And at different levels too. So if I could get onto a course, an external course, I would do it. I remember I did a Dale Carnegie course, and then when I moved to Canada as a president, obviously, like I said, I never went to university. I left school at 15. I completed grade 10, so I didn't have a higher school certificate. So when I was in Canada here, I actually I've done 4 small Rotman University courses. And they're just 3 or 4 day courses, short ones that I found. And it's just about, financial literacy or small business or leadership development. So just small things that you could do. Read lots of books. But the one thing, and where I learned most of my information and skills, was through lots of coffees, right? Lots of coffees with people. So my word of advice to the young managers is find your future self and buy them a coffee. Right? Go and find your future self and buy them a coffee. And I was fortunate enough when I arrived in Canada 13 years ago, I found a mentor or a coach, and he's 83 now. He was 70 back then at the time, and he'd been in the retail industry. He was a prominent businessman, and I cold called him and bought him a cup of coffee, and we became great friends. And he taught me everything that I needed to know about business and challenged me every day, and and drove me. And I still speak to him now, and I'll call every now and then. But he's always challenging. He's and that came from a cup of coffee. I called and said, "Can I buy you a coffee?" And we struck up a great friendship. And I was very fortunate enough to have him on my shoulder for 13 years.
Yeah, it's not rocket science, right? People ask me this all the time. They're like, it's not rocket science. Reach out. But I think sometimes in retail, when I was growing up in the stores, it was kind of, I was reaching out in my own retailer more than probably others, and signing up for things. But just now, you just reach out to people, like you said, your future self, and then go have a coffee with them. I remember messaging 2 people in the last 5 years, one of them being Deanne from Retail Council Canada, before I started building Retail U. And I said, oh, would you just have a coffee with me? This random girl. Yeah, I worked at David's Tea at the time. And she's like, yeah, sure. And I was telling her my idea, and she's like, go build it. Retail needs it, And I was like, okay. And then another guy was the president, Michael Rossi of Adidas, and just said, will you have a coffee with me? And he did. And then I realized after that conversation, I want to be a president of my own company, not somebody else's. So that's what kind of those two coffee conversations pushed me. But I just reached out to them. And I think now more than ever, there's a lot of people like retail leaders like yourself, me, other people that are willing to help and inspire and give that mentorship. So I would say to everybody, like, reach out. Or somebody could just say no. I'm terrible. I reach out like 5-10 times because I know people are busy. I do, because I want to learn from people all the time. It really makes a difference, right?
And it's interesting. That's just who we are now. Like, it's, I was very fortunate enough to have people share and give me information and help me along my journey. And that's all I want to do now. Is, our job is to pass it on. I mean, it's not for us to waste away with all of the information in our head. It's how do we pass it on? How do we develop the future leaders? How do we share our message and make them even more successful than what we are?
Yeah, and we have platforms like LinkedIn now, which we didn't have 15 years ago. We didn't exist, right? When we were growing up through retail, you couldn't just message somebody through LinkedIn, but now you can. So my advice to people watching this is exactly what Brett just said. Who do you want to be in 20 years time? And like, just reach out to them and connect with them and see what they have to say. Okay, another question. What is a common mistake that leaders make that you've observed or coached?
Chasing too many things. And so there's a Russian proverb that goes, if you chase two rabbits, you will not catch either.
Oh, I like that.
So I'm not talking about our day jobs, right? So there's a difference between being busy and having lots of things to do. Like that's just business as usual. You've got to do your emails, you've got to make your calls, you've got to serve customers, you've got to clean the floor. Like, you've got to do your job. What I'm talking about is more strategically, or when you get a good idea. So we get lots of great ideas. We read, or that's a good idea. Someone talks. Today you might get a couple of good ideas. It's about how you act, right? How you go, hey, there's a good idea. Take some time, go and think about it, strategize what needs to happen, write a plan, and then actually the execution stage is critical. But what happens is lots of people try and do, that's a good idea, that's a good idea. They'll chase lots of things, but they'll never do one thing really well. So if you get a good idea, take the time to actually execute properly, share it with your team, teach them how to do it, make sure you know what you're trying to achieve, have all the data available, give yourself a time frame, and actually put that action into place and the execution properly, instead of just running around telling everyone you've got all these great ideas and actually nothing ever happening.
Yeah, we teach that. Sarah was on last week. She's one of the authors on a Retail U course, and she was going that most people go from ideas to thinking to then action, and they miss the plan step.
Yeah.
And that, I think in retail, we're really guilty of it because we're all doers and we don't take that time to step back, specifically in field. Well, in a lot of other departments now, because everybody's just rushing really fast because of the speed that it's accelerated at. So that's really, really great advice. So, okay, looking at time, 9:27. All right, I got a couple more questions, so we're good. Can you share who inspires you? Who inspires you?
Oh, well, the first people are obviously my family. I wouldn't be in this position if I didn't have the support and the backing of obviously my wife, Micheal. I mean, I owe everything to her. And my kids now that have grown up, I mean, they've got great careers, and they inspire me to see the people that they've grown up to and what they've achieved now as Canadians from Australia. And, it wasn't easy for them to move, and they did really well. But I suppose when I look outside of my family, anybody that allows themselves to be vulnerable inspires me. So people that want to be challenged, and people that, I have managers and people that still call me for a cup of coffee and for mentorship. And when they open up and allow themselves to be vulnerable because they want to learn and grow, they're a true inspiration, and they inspire me every day. People that allow themselves to be placed in that vulnerable position for their own development and growth, they're the people that, and ultimately they're the people that we want to help. Because if they want to grow and change and be challenged, they're the ones that we want to work with. Like that, nothing inspires me more than to help those people.
Yeah, I'd say the same thing. I always felt like that with the people on my team, and I was always that person that was that person on that team. I was always wanted to be the easiest person to work with and be managed, the first person to sign up and say I wanted to learn something, and then the first person that would pass it on to somebody else. And I did not know that you didn't have a high school diploma. That's vulnerability right there that you're sharing that on here. But Yeah, it's cool. It's like I have a 17-year-old right now that doesn't want to finish school, and I'm freaking out, right? I'm like,
Yeah.
no, but then you
Well,
hear, I meet people
I'm not.
like you, and I'm like, okay, it's not that bad.
I'm not. I'm not an advocate, and I'm not saying that
No,
don't go
I
to
know
college.
that.
But I'm saying it can be done even if
It
you
can
don't
be
go to
done.
school. Yeah.
Yeah, it can be done, which is inspiring for people. So, what advice would you give a manager or a leader today that wants to, like, they're looking at you and they're going, man, he was, a trainee manager and then ended up being a president of a retailer in Canada. And now, we'll talk to what you're going to do, you're doing now, but like, what advice would you give that person looking at your career and saying, I want to follow in those footsteps?
Yeah. 2 points. Be patient. Like, there's so many young people today as everything moves at light speed, and they want to be, oh, I want to be the CEO tomorrow. Like, why can't I be the CEO tomorrow? Like, be patient. I was 8 years as a store manager, years as a regional like, learn your craft, learn retailing, learn everything you can while you can as a manager, and that will hold you in good stead as a foundation. Be patient. Like, just be patient, right? Don't chase two rabbits. Just have a little bit of patience. And then the other thing is, like I said before, which I truly believe is, find your future self and buy them a coffee. Like, go and find a peer group, get outside of your friends and find a peer group, or find people outside of your company and your initial peers, and actually go and build your network, build a really strong network, and learn. There's everybody you meet, there's a lesson to be learned if you're willing to listen.
100%. 100%. Then you got to get your own ego out the way and actually be willing to, like, listen. And one thing I always say is, learn. My advice to people is, if you're going to go have that coffee, learn how to ask really good questions. The more that you flip that script, like you said, like you're at the bottom and your team are at the top. What do you do in that scenario? You ask questions to learn so that you can keep supporting. And if you're going to go off and do what Brett's piece of advice is, go find your future self, make sure you've got really great questions. There's good books about that, like that was one thing that I really developed in my leadership style over the years. I used to be at the beginning telling, because I was like the manager, had to know it all. And as I grew, I knew less, told less, and asked more, so that I could just facilitate. So I think, learn how to ask great questions and go find your future self. And you'd be patient. You're right. It's like we all went through the ranks. We learned our craft and mastered it, and then we got moved up. I think patience is key in developing and growing in your roles. And everybody that we have on the Positive Effect that's grown up through that process said the same thing. I mean, we had a guy on that was a store manager for like 12 years in the same store, and then got promoted to a regional director of all of Dubai and everywhere in Aldo, and he said the same thing. He was in the same store for 10 years, and then all of a sudden got propelled. So it's a big deal. So Brett, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your journey. And what I'd like to say to everybody, if you find this live in your feed, please share it with your retail network. We bring on amazing leaders like Brett every week to share their story. And we want to share this with as many people as possible, so that, you can get mentorship, words of wisdom, and grow your retail career, because the effect of positive leadership cannot be underestimated. So we're going to keep showing up every week and bringing these conversations to our wider audience. So yeah, just share it. So thank you so much. It was so great talking to you today.
It was fantastic. Thanks, April.
All right. Take care.